moderator of this session. Thank you, everybody.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Brenda Wandera. I work for the African Management Institute, and I will be your moderator for this session. Thank you very much for choosing to be with us through this very interesting topic and to just understand what it is we can do to try and bridge the gap that exists currently and continues to widen due to the crisis, and that is making it difficult for women entrepreneurs to access the space that they would like, that they would dutifully should be accessing. We all know that women go through a lot of challenges as entrepreneurs, and they also have other competing needs and other things that they need to be doing. And when there's a time of crisis, also because they are caregivers and they're the ones that are dealing with families on top of the other responsibilities they have for their businesses, it becomes even more difficult for them to chart a way forward in attempting to adapt to these changes. So to help me discuss this very important topic, I do have a panel of very esteemed ladies that will be sharing some insights on what it is we can do to try and bridge this existing gap. So I will please allow me to let them introduce themselves and share a little bit about what their work has been or why it is they're interested in this space. So I would like to request Adenike to go first. Introduce yourself, please.
Good afternoon, Brenda. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adenike Adeyemi. I'm the Executive Director for Faith Foundation. Is a 21-year-old nonprofit supporting Nigerian entrepreneurs to start, grow, and scale their businesses. Gender inclusion became something that was a strategic priority for us. We're currently on a 5-year strategy, and when we launched that strategy in 2019, we looked and we said women make up half of the businesses in Nigeria. So if we don't take an intentional approach to involving, including, and enabling women entrepreneurs to start, grow, and successfully scale their businesses, then we're only doing half of the work that we've set out to. So that's why this is of interest to me, and I look forward to sharing, but also learning today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adenike. Anna, please.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Anna Domingo. I work for the International Finance Corporation, IFC, in the Gender and Economic Inclusion Group. And within this department, I work for Women Entrepreneurship team. So my focus is on supporting women entrepreneurs access to market opportunities. And thanks so much for inviting me to participate in this panel.
Thank you, Anna. Last but not least, Patricia.
Thank you, Brenda. So good morning and good afternoon to everyone. My name is Patricia Mainer, and I'm a Partnerships Manager at African Management Institute, which we abbreviate as AMI. And AMI enables ambitious businesses across Africa to thrive through practical tools and training. And we have been doing this since 2014. And in the time that we've been around, we've delivered over 80 programs across 36 countries on the continent. And a lot of these programs have been delivered to entrepreneurs. And so when it comes to our interest in this topic, it's really around what Adenike just mentioned, that majority of the entrepreneurs on this continent are women. And so we want to be able to support these women to build thriving and resilient businesses that are able to withstand the different challenges that come around. So we're really excited to be here this afternoon just to discuss some of this and to share some of our learnings and insights on this, and just to see where we go from here. And I'm dialing in from Nairobi today.
Thank you very much. So as we've heard from the previous speaker, and as we are aware, there already exists a gap, a gender gap, and it's a challenge for women entrepreneurs to thrive in the space. But there are some issues, or rather there are some crisis that happens that makes that problem even worse. The current biggest crisis we're facing world over is COVID-19. And COVID-19 has affected women and has actually, unfortunately, contributed to widening of that particular gap. So I would like to just understand from you, Anna, what are the critical factors that have widened this gender gap during COVID-19, and how is that affecting women entrepreneurs?
Thank you, Brenda. So yeah, this is what we have seen from several studies conducted also in the Africa region, but around the world, that how COVID-19 has amplified the challenges that many women entrepreneurs face on a daily basis. And these challenges, some of them were already existing before the crisis, like, for example, access to finance. But today, like new pandemic-related like restrictions on financing has posed even greater barriers to the operations and financial sustainability on women entrepreneurs. I just wanted to share a few data on a IFC study conducted on the impact of COVID-19 and women-led businesses in sub-Saharan Africa that found that over 25% of all these businesses were unable to continue operating during the crisis, but this number is as high as 52% in Cameroon or 41% in Senegal. So these are some of the hard hits of the crisis, and there are several reasons why this is especially like having an impact on women SMEs, and I'm going to mention a few of them. So one is on the smaller size of women entrepreneurs, and also like high levels of informality in some sectors and in some countries. And this has posed a challenge and barriers for some of these businesses to even access some of the support services that were available for the businesses during the crisis. Then also we see a concentration of women-owned businesses in some heavily affected sectors in the crisis, and these are, for example, trade, manufacturing, hospitality, tourism, etc. And then another factor I wanted to mention that, Brenda, you touched on this a little bit already in the introduction, is the care responsibilities. Those have increased, like, for example, kids not attending a school due to closures, etc., which has given like more care responsibilities, especially to women, and then less time to dedicate to their businesses. So these are some of the points I wanted to highlight.
Thank you very much, Anna. But as we know, with every challenge, there's always an opportunity, and people that can look at it in a different way can find a way to work around it. So I'm just wondering, and I would like to request Patricia to share some of the current opportunities that are available to support the growth and development of women entrepreneurs during these times, and especially the women who are in rural areas who unfortunately are hardest hit by all this crisis.
Sure, thanks, Brenda. So we know that just generally that women-led SMEs are typically less likely to actually access business development support services to help them grow their businesses. But what we found specifically over the last year and a half is that virtual learning programs are actually helping to, in some small way, kind of bridge this gap, and we've seen that it's providing opportunities that would otherwise be unavailable to women, especially in rural settings. When you think of women entrepreneurs in rural settings, the increased quote unquote burden on them when it comes to domestic responsibilities is typically higher. But we found that when these women are actually afforded these opportunities, which are now extended through virtual programming, the rate of resources that they download and the tools that they download has actually been higher than their male counterparts. And what's been interesting for us as an organization, as we've been studying and looking at this over the past year and a half, is we found that when it comes to say like the course completion of a program, the women entrepreneurs tend to have a lower rates of completion. But when it comes to downloading the tools, which is where the real impact within the entrepreneur space comes in, is them downloading the tools and applying them in the context of their businesses, we find that women entrepreneurs are actually having higher tools and resource downloads. And we think that this is actually speaking to, when it comes to the courses, women have very limited time, and sometimes, especially, speaking again to women in rural settings, where their time is under such constraint. And so what we think is happening is that they might not have the time to sit through the entire course. So they may start it because they do have the interest, But because they don't have that level of flexibility on their time, then what they're doing is going ahead and downloading the resources and tools which they can then continue to use in real time in the context of their business. So we see that virtual learning has really opened up this opportunity for women in the rural settings. And I just want to kind of add a caveat there, because anytime we talk about virtual learning, there's also the question of connectivity. And so what we've done as an organization is we've provided our content and tools through a mobile app, which is accessible once they download it the first time. So they don't need to keep having continued access to the internet to be able to access the tools or to be able to access the resources and content. And this has really been helpful, because then once they have it downloaded on their phone, then they're able to go about their business and continue to use it in real time. The other opportunity that we've seen is just this access to networks, and we found that, again, by virtue of the virtual programming, we're able to offer a much wider resource when it comes to both formal and informal networks. And we found that this is something that has been, that we've been very intentional about designing in our programs, because for women entrepreneurs, there's this sense of community that's really built by women coming together and being able to either brainstorm on an issue or share insights, or even just encourage each other through their entrepreneurship journey. And so we found that this has been a really exciting opportunity for a lot of the women entrepreneurs that have been in our program. And then the last quick point I'll just mention is just the investing in skills development. We've seen that as an opportunity because, for example, women trying to figure out, with the increased restrictions with COVID-19, how do you continue to operate your business? And so we've been able to offer programs that actually help them digitize their businesses, give them the opportunity for social commerce so that they're able to continue running their businesses despite the restrictions with social interactions. So yeah, let me pause there for now. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Patricia, for those great examples and just demonstrating how when you bring these interventions, when you bring training and others to a place that is closer to women, you start to bridge some of these gaps that exist. Earlier on, I think Anna spoke about how the caregiving responsibility has increased. And so if you provide tools, for example, on mobile, and the ladies can get an opportunity to look at them later, it sort of also increases their ability to get through this trainings and other opportunities that exist. So Adenike, perhaps you could also give some examples on how your organization has also worked around adopting a better gender lens approach to address some of the needs and challenges that Anna spoke about for women entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Brenda. So one of the things that we took as priority was that we had to put a gender-less approach on the program design, from the planning, recruitment, implementation, support services, and even how we report the impact of the program. And when you situate the design, a gender lens approach to the design of the program, what that means is that you're not able to consider what are the specific needs of female-led businesses, and how do we need to make it to be more gender approach, gender inclusive. A paradigm that I would like to suggest for us to use was something we picked up from, I think it was an Impact Hub report, because the challenge we saw were largely in our accelerator program. So we have a Scale Up Lab accelerator program. It's a 6-month accelerator program for high growth potential businesses. And when we looked at the first cohort that went, we had only 30% representation from women. And if you look at the data specifically to Nigeria, we have about 44% of women, of micro businesses are led by women, but only 22% of growth stage businesses, so small and medium enterprise businesses, are led by women. And our intention was around saying, how do you continue to ensure a growth support, intentional growth support and inclusive program for that? So there are 3 things. How we needed to ensure equity of access. So, and what that meant for us is that how do we redesign our program to make sure that information about the program, information about the services, the opportunities that are available, even the timing, the location, as Patricia had meant, was accessible even to the women in the first place. Because unlike men, if you look at some of the things that Anna said, you know, a typical male-led business or a male entrepreneur will look at something and he doesn't have all the baggages around caring for children, caring for family, and he's able to make himself available for that. But women have so many things that they're juggling and so many other considerations for that. So if the woman feels that, if the women feel that this is not even accessible to me, they're not even going to explore the opportunity in the first place. So equity of access was important. The other thing for us was equity of treatment, you know, and that also meant that what are the things we may be doing intentionally or unintentionally that will be discriminating against women, also at the different program point. So for our accelerator program, for instance, it has a very rigorous recruitment and shortlisting process. And something as simple as allowing a woman to bring her child during the shortlisting process is as important as also making sure that she's available, you know. And and in fact, we had to shift our recruitment and shortlisting for that to also be mobile, rather than everybody coming to Lagos for the shortlisting process. And then because we remember we had like 2 or 3 emails from some women entrepreneurs who said they couldn't come with their babies and all of that. And so about 3 years ago, we even started a virtual process with that. And you have to, and it was a bit of a hoop for us to allow our assessment process to accommodate for virtual modalities, because in a lot of this shortlisting, the women bring their products, their services. So how do you bridge the gap between the experience that you can get from understanding the entrepreneur that you may not have in a virtual, and this was pre-COVID. Now people are more used to that with it. So how do you ensure that all through the program implementation, the women also have equal treatment that also takes into consideration things around gender bias? We had to and still do gender bias trainings particularly for mentors and for facilitators of our accelerator programs, so that even in terms of the way they approach, in terms of the way the presentations are, simple things around using only male-led businesses as an example and not using role modeling, where women also see similar examples across the various sectors and the spaces and the locations that they come from. And I have to also speak to that even from countries, because quite a lot of us have multiple ethnicities in the countries that we look at. For women more in particularly, when you're using role modeling examples for mentors, and even using, for instance, you're developing case studies, it also helps. We found out that the assimilation was improved when you use examples, not just of similar, but also women from their backgrounds and women from their sector. So there's a relativity aspect to it that we also had to take into consideration. And then the third equity conversation is also around the outcomes, where you are saying that, you know, how are you ensuring that your women have access to the kind of support, the linkages, the investments, the equity? And if you're seeing those gaps, why are those gaps caused and what can be done about it? The last thing I will say is the example Patricia has said, which is around data. How are you using data to better understand the gaps and the opportunities from a gender equity perspective? And I even wrote down the examples because I found that interesting, that women downloaded the tools much at a higher rate than women. And that's really what the data helps you to do. And we had to take a step and say, okay, let's look at, because what we would normally have done up until about 3 years ago was just look at the data from how many women applied and how many women enrolled. But then you're now drilling that into a bit more detail to say, what is the data telling you to
since we lost Adenike.
Lost Adenike. As we try to, oh, she's back.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I was speaking to myself. My data is matching. Yes. So I was just rounding up with talking about data and making sure that even from, it's the same bucket. You can't also, we also had to realize that we couldn't lump all women entrepreneurs in one bucket. You had to make considerations for their geographical considerations, their sector considerations, their business stage considerations. And in doing a gender lens approach, you almost have to drill down and also make particular provisions for whatever stage of their businesses are and the additional considerations of their demographics beyond just the gender itself too. Thank you.
Yeah, Thank you very much, Adenike. Those are very great examples. I like your initial statement where you said that actually the adopting of a gender lens from your institution has been done right from program recruitment, planning, implementation, and the actual even engagement with the people, which is exactly what is what we need to do in order to make sure that the needs and the unique requirements for women are actually being taken care of, and that we are encouraging the women and providing them with the right space to thrive, and being cognizant also of all the other competing needs and competing expectations that are there for them. I think one of the other things that you pointed out that actually really stood out was also around where you spoke about using relatable examples for these women. A lot of times, many institutions assume, or we put a woman, maybe from one other part of the continent that has totally different norms, different cultures, and we feel women are included. So just that thinking around, finding someone that's very relatable to the particular audience makes this makes the assimilation, as you put it, a little more. Earlier on, as you were speaking, Anna, you spoke about some of the work that you have done, the research. I would just like you to request you to share some of the lessons that you have learned, or rather that you would like to share with the rest around how to increase women participation in some of these development programs.
Thanks, Patricia. Yeah, there is some work that we did in the previous year, and there is a publication we published in 2020 on principles for learning and a guide to training that contains a supplement that talks specifically on what are the gender inclusive considerations for the design, implementation, and evaluation of programs. And it takes considerations into 3 big areas that go completely in line with some of the facts that already Adenike and Patricia have mentioned, but they are organized in these big 3 categories. One is country, individually, and family. So on the country side, it takes into account like social and cultural norms, technology, infrastructure, communication channels, etc., to deliver training. On the individual piece, it takes into account like the personal characteristics of the program participants and what needs to be researched in order to understand the specific needs of women entrepreneurs, like levels of confidence, leadership, education, etc. And then the last bucket, it takes into account like family considerations, like household obligations, care responsibilities, time constraints, etc. So usually what we do when we design a specific programs that target women entrepreneurs, first of all is the collection of gender disaggregated data to inform what are the gender gaps and what are the specific challenges and needs of women entrepreneurs. And then we use this data to design the programs. Something that we see like very, very important in the design phase is the involvement of different stakeholders, including women-owned businesses, because we have seen like sometimes we design programs for women-owned businesses, but then we don't include them in the design phase. And I think taking this into consideration, their opinions and what they think about the program, piloting the program, etc. This is, I think, critical and very, very important to ensure participation. And then I think more needs to be done as well in the area of dissemination of available support for women entrepreneurs. We hear a lot that there are a lot of support, but then women entrepreneurs don't know where to find because maybe the ecosystem is not organized. So something as well to take into account is with whom we can partner in order to reach out to the beneficiaries of specific programs targeting women entrepreneurs. And it could be a specific networks for women entrepreneurs, it could be associations, etc. And then one last point I wanted to make is on the, I think, increased importance and increased demand for development of networks, entrepreneurship networks. among women entrepreneurs, but also with businesses. And we see as well from the previous study, I mentioned it before, that there was a big proportion, like 30% of the women SMEs, that they don't belong to any type of association of business network. And this was one of the needs and demands as well from them to increase access to market, access to consumers, etc.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anna, for those insights. And I'm hoping you'll be able to share also some of the lessons on that from that as well in the chat for anybody that was interested in reading about that further. I think one of the things you spoke about is the importance of developing some networks for the SMEs as part of the program design for programs that are being designed to support women. Patricia, earlier on, I think you alluded to some of these networks within some of the programs that AMI is implementing. Could you please speak to some of the examples that you've designed to help improve women entrepreneurship, and specifically around any work that has been done to develop and improve networks for women SMEs?
Yeah, sure. And actually, before I go into that, I just want to make a comment on something that Anna just shared on those kind of three main buckets she mentioned. And one of them, when she talked about the individual characteristics of the participants, it's been interesting for us that we found that even with, where you have women participants in a program, you'll find that sometimes when you have kind of like the general session, you'll find, or the general workshop, you'll find that there are some participants who will be really quiet and not say anything in the workshop. But then when you actually break down, into smaller groups where you pair them off in groups of either 2 or 3 entrepreneurs and either give them, some kind of activity or some kind of role play or something, then you find that this same participant who was really quiet in the general group is like leading the small group and is really verbal and articulate and really just leading the small group. And so I think it just speaks to what Anna was saying, that even as we design these programs, as BDS providers and as ESOs, we need to consider those 3 buckets that she's talked about, because at the end of the day, it is individuals that we are training and we need to, or individuals that we are supporting, and we need to think about some of those individual characteristics or individual personality traits that actually do affect their learning and their implementation of what they're learning. But to address your question, Brenda, so yes, I did talk about networks, and what we've done is we have set up or included in our programs is different kinds of networks. So I talked about kind of the more formal networks, and we have what we call a Thrive network, which is really a community of entrepreneurs from across the continent. We have over 15,000 strong right now. And through that, we have formal networking sessions. We provide an opportunity once a month for these entrepreneurs to come together and to then break out into smaller groups and offer whatever services that whatever business they're in, whatever services that they provide amongst each other. And so they get the opportunity to, basically verbally articulate, this is my business, this is what I offer, this is how I can benefit you. And we've seen business partnerships form through this. We've seen businesses be able to actually expand into new markets or new regions. And so that's been more of kind of a formalized network. And then when it comes to the informal networks, it's just within the context of our our learning programs. We have broken up the participants into what I was calling smaller peer groups, is what we call them, and it gives them the opportunity in a group of 3 or 5 to really kind of hone in on their skills in first being able to articulate what their business is, right? Because that's something that they'll need to use when they're speaking to customers or when they're speaking to potential funders or potential partners. And so it gives them the opportunity to really speak about their business and what their offering is. And through that, again, they're able to, even though it may be informal, to both practice, but also to start to form linkages or look for other ways in which they would be able to expand their businesses.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Adenike, perhaps you could also share some examples of programs that you have designed within your organization that have helped women entrepreneurs to increase their participation, and particularly also focusing a little bit on some of the buckets that Anna has shared that will be important to consider when designing these programs in order to bridge the existing gender gaps.
Okay, thanks. I'll share 3 examples. The first one, I think, also starts with the organization itself. So almost like how every year you do, so I know every year in Nigeria, you have to do like anti-money laundering training and all of that. One of the recommendations and one of the things we've started is that every year you want to do a gender bias training for all the staff. It's almost like not even just the staff, but those who will be the facilitators, the mentors, the advisors. We started that for our faculty and advisors, and you almost want to do like a renewal around it because you want to look at, you want to let them to appreciate their own discrimination, their bias, and then what are some of the ways that they can approach it depending on whatever point or handshake that they have with the participants, whether from design, implementation, or even just administration. So because it can be as little as a woman coming in with 2 or 3 of her children and the security stopping her at your facility for the training center for coming, and that's why it's everybody across the organization really has to be part of that. The second thing which we've done, which we found that has been quite productive and impact driven, particularly around some of the things that Anna spoke about, is sector specific support for women. And not just sector-specific support for women, value chain. So in accelerator programs, for instance, where we focus on like the agribusiness value chain, one of the things when we looked at the data about 4 years ago was that the women that even played in those spaces played in the less productive parts of the value chain. And so one of the things, if you're helping somebody to see the opportunities, you almost have to handhold them during the process. And so part of our program design review strategies was to also ensure that the deliberate handholding support that was required at critical aspects or points of the value chain that required much more technical support, much more funding and investment support, or even access to networks that women may not traditionally have had access to, we now had to increase or expand that investment for women in particular. And so even when you're looking at things around access to capital for women, it's really around access to growth capital, technical capital, and sometimes it's just an open door because, again, if you come from environments like ours where even when you need, so for instance, you want to set up a production factory or space somewhere, it's beyond just having the money. It's also being able to have access to the regulatory agencies or officers that will give you the approvals and the permits that you need. It means that in some cases you have to stay in the office for a whole day to be able to see the right officers. They have to come and visit you, sometimes even at odd hours. And so once we explored that data that now broke down what the challenges that were for women specifically, we were now able to start to do linkages for specific technical assistance that will sort of help bridge the person. So that person is representing, supporting the women in those particular circumstances. So that's the second example around looking at sector and value chain gaps and where exactly are the challenges that the women have and helping them to on that path. And the last example I would give is around something that was also mentioned earlier so beyond just the technical support is the soft skill support in terms of the program design. So even sessions deliberately focused around presentations, business pitching skills, and then technical ones around financial literacy and digital literacy skills, improving confidence level, giving them opportunities to test, to profile, to build their technical skills, but in a safe space, right? Before you throw them out there. So for quite a lot of, for instance, when we're having investor matching sessions, we realized that we had more requests from the women-led sessions for practice sessions before the investor pitches than the men. And when I say more requests, in fact, last year we had to look at it and we saw that at least 3 or 4 times per 4 persons that were advisors for a woman was being seen at that request. So you have to take that and you have to say, okay, if a man will probably be fine with 1 or 2 practice sessions, but a woman, up until that investor conversation is going to happen, you have to make that availability for that. So, and it's not about them. It's really just saying, how do you provide the resources, the availability for them to be able to feel there's a safe space for them to test, retest, and improve their skills until they're confident. And the last thing I would say is that those people now end up being the story. So when we're talking about the storytelling of gender lens successes, it is using the women who have walked on those paths to also show and say, okay, I was like you before, I couldn't even do a PowerPoint presentation. I froze during my pitch presentation, but I went through this, I went through that. I'm now able to do that. Those really actually go a long way in terms of helping to draw a lot of our women to the point where you want them to be, because that really is where the inspiration is. And the belief that, yes, I can also, if that person went through this, I can go through it and also be successful.
Thank you very much. I like the 3 areas that you summarized. You know, how the organization itself has thought about gender inclusion, has thought about how these gaps can be built. I also took keen interest also on the focusing on sector specific and value chain gaps and bringing on board. Maybe Adenike, if you don't mind, you could speak a little bit to how has this involved any partnerships? How have this been grown? Has there been any thoughts around who are the partners that come into this and how do they also either help to bridge the gap or widen the gap?
Yeah, so I think that the partners that have, so if I think of our partners, they're outside of us, they will be our technical and our funding partners, because we're a non-profit and we get a lot of that. The great thing is that, you know, gender lens is a global agenda for quite a lot of partners. So that's even something that a number of our partners, if not all our partners, see as a priority. It is the how that is a challenge to them. And one of the things, so there's a lot of programs that we do supporting. Hello?
We can hear you now. Your line was a little choppy.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So one of the things, one of the examples from one of our partners was how do you support youth-led businesses who are driven by women to be able to provide innovative business ideas and then build sustainable and successful businesses with that. And one of the things I have discovered, which is very similar to what we're doing in that session, is that there's quite a lot of learning and sharing in terms of understanding what has worked in different programs. So one of our partners in particular has brought us together with other partners who are implementing similar programs, but in other parts of Africa and in the Middle East. And we built a community of practice with a number of sessions focused around gender equity sharing knowledge and exchange. And that has been very impactful to the programs that we do. But it's even gone beyond then to even the market linkages session, because we finished the session and we said, okay, we can actually pair a lot of this business with each other to share, to learn, to exchange. So somebody is here, but also learning from somebody who is building a business in Mali and sharing and learning, exchanging similar products, similar services, almost similar context, but also getting and sharing knowledges and exchanges to that. So our partnerships have even gone beyond just helping us, but even filtered down to the entrepreneurs.
Thank you very much. And I notice this conversation is very interesting and time is also moving very fast. I would now just like to request each one of you, starting with you, Anna, as an institution that has been, you know, building guides and developing sort of like manuals or sharing lessons with people that are in the space, supporting women entrepreneurs and helping them to stay afloat across the whole period and even during this crisis. What would be some of the key considerations that you would say people should have in mind while developing these kinds of programs? In 2 minutes, Anna.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I think three key considerations or actions that I think intermediary organizations can take. First, focusing on the design and collecting gender disaggregated data that can be used to inform gender analysis, and going deep into this research on specific, like looking at the country, but also looking at the size of the businesses, like different sizes may have different needs. So taking into account different considerations and going deep on this. Then how to use this data to design the projects and involving a wide range of stakeholders. For example, in our work on women entrepreneurs access to market, I mean, we involved corporates, buyers there, for example. So it's not only tackling like the supply side of things, but also tackling maybe or educating corporates on how to better engage women entrepreneurs, increase their access to their supply chains or increase their distributors, etc. And then the third area, I would say, yeah, improve a better dissemination of the available support and provide very targeted targeted participants for targeted projects. And one area I wanted to mention, I think there is big potential, and we are looking at this, is the e-commerce, like giving the COVID, like the increased digitalization, like what's the potential of women entrepreneurs to get better access to e-commerce platforms. We are working with Jumia in Nigeria and Kenya, where I think half of the sellers they have in their platforms are women. And we see like even women doing very well in sectors in the e-commerce space that maybe they are not as much represented like offline in stores, like for example in the electronics sector. So we identified, and I wanted to highlight e-commerce platforms and the use of them and how to increase women access to those. It's I think it has a lot of potential. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Anna. Patricia, you spoke about earlier on, the use of digital platforms, digital training, and how that has really helped to bridge the gender gap and to bring inclusion, and for women to also be able to, access the courses even better and do it at their own times. Are there any lessons that you would like to share with other ESOs or other institutions that are doing similar work as AMI on how to better bridge these gaps when designing programs?
Yeah, sure. So I have a couple of things I want to share, and one is, which has actually already been mentioned by Anna and Adenike, is look at the data, because the data is telling a story, and you need to look at that data to really understand what is going on with the entrepreneurs that you serve, and the types of entrepreneurs that you hope to serve. So looking at the data helps with, especially when it comes to gender disaggregated data. Then you're able to really look at, what are the trends, or what are some of the drivers, and what is this data speaking to, and so then you're better able to design programs that will speak to women entrepreneurs and really serve their needs. And so I would say definitely looking at the data is critical. And then the second thing is don't be afraid to test the approach, because in as much as we look at data, we might come up with something where we realize actually this doesn't quite fit, or this doesn't quite work, but you won't know until you test it. And so I think just not being afraid to test different approaches and really find out what is the right approach that works for the entrepreneurs that you're looking to support. And then finally is just partnering with expert organizations, because no one organization has it all figured out and knows it all. And so just being able to look out there, as Adenike said, about knowledge sharing, because there could be an organization that has had a program that has worked really well in a certain part of the continent, and maybe some of the learnings and experiences from that could be applied to a different part of the continent, or maybe it wouldn't, but you wouldn't know until you actually have that knowledge sharing, and partnering with organizations that are really keenly looking at gender lens approaches. So for example, as AMI, we've partnered with Value for Women, who are actually helping us refine and really reframe our value proposition for women entrepreneurs so that we continue to deliver impact for these women. So those are kind of the three things I would say that organizations really need to look at as we think about gender lens approaches.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Lastly but not least, Adenike, you spoke about your organization itself adopting a gender lens approach. Perhaps you could share some of the lessons that you could give to other organizations to also follow suit.
So I think honestly, Anna and Patricia have covered the approaches that we would use. I probably will just talk about two. And the first one of that would be involving in policy making. So a lot of conversations we've had are around, the work that we do in implementing the programs, but the environment also has to be conducive to support the growth and the sustainability of women-led businesses. And the practical ways that we have been thinking around, and this is still work in progress for us, I have to say, is involving women in trade groups, business membership organizations, in associations, in chambers of commerce, where those conversations around policy making, even if it's at a sector level, but for SMEs, are happening, and they're happening at a local level, encouraging them to play leadership roles in that. And we actually have two examples, particularly in the agribusiness space, where we've supported them to become chair and vice chair of the agribusiness groups for the chambers of commerce. And that really raises a lot of things, because what you're also doing is providing a gender lens approach to policy making and design. So even as ESOs, we have to think of the larger ecosystem that we are all plugged in different ways and doing that. And when you involve that, you're not just impacting policy making and design, but you're developing women leaders, you're impacting nation. So you're even impacting governance as a whole on that. So that's something that I would suggest. Again, for us, like I said, is a large, you're dealing with so many factors, but that's something that I know that we're thinking about, and it will be useful for others to consider. The second thing, which is also very prior, and I mentioned this earlier on, is growth support. So again, the data that I look at shows that there's actually quite a lot of support, not enough, but there's more support for micro-led businesses, for women leading micro-led businesses than growth stage businesses. And so part of our conversations is also how, and one of the things, and that's why our gender inclusion strategy is more skewed to our accelerator programs than less to our pre-incubation program. But guess what? We also learned that if we don't even have the pipeline for the women into the accelerator programs, then there's a problem. And so one of the things we've started to do is that in our incubation programs, we are almost preparing, we're preparing them to be pipelined even into the accelerator program. So there has to be a long-term view on the angle in the approach for supporting women businesses, not just for them to be successful businesses, but to also to expand and to reach the possible potential that they can, as with any other gender, and all of that with it. So growth support, intentional growth support, and looking at the challenges around enabling and supporting women to grow and scale their businesses is important. I thought Afyong's speech earlier was really, really inspiring, and she's scaling as a business, but there's so many challenges around that. There are quite a lot of women who are in her space, who are doing things around processing, around packaging, but there's so many things against you, and that intentional. We need more real fruits, examples in our environment and representation in our environment, so that when we think of women-led businesses, we are not just thinking of micro businesses, because a lot of times that's the picture that we see and that is the image that we have. So that's how I will round up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies. This was a very insightful session. If you'll allow me to just quickly summarize the lessons that you've given. We've spoken about data. Data is very important. Use the data in the design of the projects, and while you're doing that, involve a lot of stakeholders, a range of stakeholders, to ensure that the needs of the different categories of women and women in organizations are included. At the same time, we need to look at this data so as to understand the needs of the people that we're serving and try to work with also disaggregated data. The other thing is we need not to be afraid to test approaches. Test the approaches. If they don't work, then try out others, and it's the only way that we'll find lasting solutions. We need to partner with expert organizations, especially organizations that are looking at how to, reduce the gender gap and how to make programs more gender sensitive. At the same time, we need to improve dissemination of available lessons so that we can have more institutions adopting the right approaches and being able to work. We also need to be involved in policy making and creating a conducive environment, because all this work can be being done, but for as long as the environment is not supportive for some of these approaches or some of these programs we're designing to work, then we will have some challenges. And then we also need to be intentional about developing growth stage entrepreneurs. These assumptions that women SMEs or women entrepreneurs are all at startup level is actually a wrong assumption. There needs to be a development of or an intentional focus on women entrepreneurs across different stages of business as they grow. Thank you very much to my esteemed panels and ladies and gentlemen for listening, and we hope that you have gained some insights from this session. Back to you, Joshua.